Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Aubern Mason, artist, and she also refers to herself as a mercenary artist, which I was just telling her made me giggle. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
I have a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree from Savannah College of Art and Design. I graduated in 2002 with a degree in illustration. And immediately after graduating, we realized that illustration in the way that we were taught is dead. There's just no market for it.
Right.
And I actually met my husband at school. We graduated with the same stats. So anyway, after graduation, we started doing decorative painting and murals. And so I've been doing this since 2002.
Okay.
And we studied at Decorative Finishes Studio in Louisville, Kentucky with Martin Allen Hirsch.
That's since closed. And sorry, my Bluetooth just died. So hopefully you can.
Oh, no. Actually, it's a little bit louder. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Perfect. So anyway, so we went to Decorative Finishes Studio in Louisville, Kentucky and studied with Martin Allen Hirsch. And we learned all about the ins and outs and hows of doing decorative painting. And then when I was in college, I was able to go to multiple trips to Europe to study over the summers. And one of our trips was to London, and we saw the work of Thomas Kershaw, and he is the master of marbling and wood graining. And even being nose to nose with his work, you can't really tell the difference between it and actual marble and wood. He was amazing. And his secrets died with him. Nobody really knows exactly how he did what he did.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was mesmerized by his work. Well, then eventually in I think it was 2006, a class was offered with a man named Mike McNeil, who passed away this February. But he was the premier expert on all things Kershaw.
Okay.
And he was also he's the only American member of a London Guild for Marbling and Wood Graining.
Oh.
And the youngest member in their history. Yeah, he was amazing. And so there was a class that was being offered with him. So of course we jumped at it.
Right.
And my husband and I went, and we learned to do marbles and woods from him. And yeah, so that's kind of a quick little art background.
Well, and that's very very interesting, and that's kind of how we try to find classes and things to kind of continue our education. So I think that's really, really important. I'm curious about you studied illustration, and you said the way that you learned how to do it has changed. It wasn't applicable anymore. Were you illustrating by hand then?
Yeah, it was. I came out with an emphasis in children's books illustration using watercolor.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's just not enough of a market for the 300 and some odd illustrators they were putting out each year.
Right. Yeah. There's a graphic designer that I knew that was just a couple years older than me. So he was right at that cusp of like before we start using computers for just about everything. And
Mhm.
when he went to graphic design school, he spent an entire year learning how to do fonts by hand. And he
Now
was
that's fashionable again,
yeah.
but about a 20-year span, nobody was doing it by hand.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just like, I can't even imagine, like, that doesn't, but I'm not creative in that way. So that does not sound like fun to me. So tell me why you chose preservation or faux painting.
Well, my husband and I started Flying Cat Studio in 2002. Oh, no, sorry, 2003, I
Okay.
think it is. And before we were even married. And we just did a mural in a rental house, and it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just thought, seeing an entire house as a canvas
Right.
would be just so much fun. So that's really why we started doing decorative painting. And the historic stuff came along organically. Because when we started doing the decorative painting, when we started doing the marbling and wood graining, we started getting a few little historic jobs for mantles and things like that. And it just sort of escalated from there.
I
To the next question.
Well, I was well, and I was thinking too. I know the Savannah art, or is it Savannah School of Art and Design?
Savannah College, yeah.
College of Art and Design. They have a preservation program too. That's why I'm familiar with them. So but I guess that really, because of what you studied, that wouldn't have been applicable in.
They don't. I've been trying to get in with them with the preservation department, and I've spoken to the dean about coming in and doing a lecture or doing a webinar or something like that. We haven't really fleshed it out yet and nailed anything down, but the techniques that I use, I would be like a demonstration for them, and like a quick rundown of the history and the tools and stuff like that. It wouldn't actually be like teaching the students to go out and do wood graining. It'd be more like this is what I do, kind of a contractor introduction kind of thing, I guess.
And and I would think that a lot of the students there probably would, unless they were really interested, wouldn't do that themselves, but it's good to have that background to be able to
right, and to let them know it exists.
Yes. Yeah.
There's still people out there in the world who do this art form.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me about your work. Anything you want to tell me, your clients, the geographic area, projects, anything.
All of my work has been in this mostly mostly in Georgia.
Okay.
And this recent job was up in Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. Okay. In Natural Bridge. So as far as the historic work goes, we started out, we got a couple of National Register homes that we did just like little things for. And then we had this one client named Tom Lee, and he was absolutely passionate about historic preservation and restoration. And he took us under his wing, and he told us all about, preserving the patina and how to honor the house and honor the tradition of the itinerant painter. And he taught us about the American itinerant painter, which is a vastly different experience from the British school, which is what we learned from Mike McNeil in the European school. In Europe and in Britain, they were honored artists. It was a high art. Yeah. Here in the United States, it was an apprenticeship program and a craftsman.
Yeah. And was it more guild based in Europe or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Europe, it is absolutely guild based. Here in the US, it was just some guy with a wagon and a couple of apprentices.
And some paint.
Yeah. Yeah. He had, his buckets of brushes and his, and I've recently learned that they had these fantastic paper hats that was almost like a chef hat, but puffier. So I can only imagine how many beams they bonged their heads on. Because your peripheral vision would have been just shot.
Oh my goodness. But
yeah, they had these amazing puffy paper hats and these long aprons, sometimes down to their ankles. And I'm like, you guys had a death wish trying to go up a ladder.
Oh, can you imagine tumbling
down to your ankles? Are you kidding me? No. So anyway,
that's funny.
But yeah, their whole experience was vastly different from the Europeans. And Tom walked us through their whole their life, this is how they worked. This is what they worked with and all this. And then we started working in his house, which is an 1833. I don't remember the the name of the architectural style, but it's a very primitive home.
I was gonna
Lots
say,
of
yeah,
woodwork.
that's kind of early. Was that in Georgia?
Yeah, it was it's the oldest house in the county.
Okay, very cool.
This is West Georgia.
Okay.
About an hour from Alabama.
Yeah.
So
that would have been like the frontier.
it was.
Yeah.
It was a frontier house.
Yeah.
And all heart pine, complete heart
okay.
pine construction.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, your listeners would know, doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So, but we think, I guess, because of Tom's tutelage in a way, you know, we think of heart pine as being like gold for my husband and I. It's beautiful to work on. And one thing that Tom taught us about was a lot about the patina. Like, you don't take away the dents and the dings and the scups and the scrapes, because that adds to it. Which, when you're using thin glazes that tend to pool, that's a challenge.
Right. Yeah. Because you're actually drawing it up, like you're bringing attention to it.
Yeah. So then our work in his house got us into Early American Life magazine as a preferred contractor. And this was a while back. This was 2007, 2008, and 2009. So then we ended up on his neighbor's house, which is this incredible home. It's 1835, but it's the architectural quality is much greater. Yeah. It's not primitive at all. It's got this huge central hallway that's like 30 feet by like 55 to 60 feet. And my husband and I did all the woodwork in that hallway. We did all the wainscoting, the trim.
Oh my goodness.
It was all marbled. And then we did 4 smaller doors and 2 huge double doors in a feathered mahogany, which that's a mahogany.
Oh yes.
But in a very dark one though. And so then that was like the premiere. And then we're also at the same time doing modern stuff for some of the largest builders in the Southeast.
Like murals, or are you doing?
Yeah, murals, decorative painting, all the swooshy paint finishes and metallics and all the modern stuff. Yeah. And then the economy crashed in 2010, and it took our business with it. So we had to close. I took time off to have babies and, do all that mommy stuff. And then the client with the huge central hall called me up and asked me to come and do some touch up. That went beautifully. It was so great they're that one client that if you could just clone them and work for them your entire life, you'd be happy.
We have some clients like that like when they call, we're happy to hear from them.
Whatever you want. Whatever you want, normally ceilings are off limits for me, but I'm like, I'll do a ceiling for you guys. We're good.
My husband has said that to somebody. Their house is the oldest house in Westchester. And it was really raining, and they had a tour, and Jonathan was trying to get something finished up on the exterior. So he set up pop-ups. He had he was running the electric outside, and he said to him, I wouldn't have done this for anybody else, but we love you.
Nobody else.
Yes.
Nobody else. So, so they called then. So while after I'm doing that, he sits me down. He's like, I just bought this house in Virginia, and it has all of this original wood graining and marbling. Would you do it for me? And since they're that once in a lifetime client, I said, absolutely, Right. So I've been working on that since June of 2020. Okay. And it's now, it's March of 21. Yeah. So I've been going up in 2-week spells and just banging it out, doing the best I can with the time I have up there. And sometimes damage doesn't quite come across very well in photographs. Yeah. So the photographs I had before, when I bid the job, they didn't look that bad. Right. Well, then I get up there, and there's the entire dining room the wainscoting is all original mahogany wood graining. And it was beat up. Oh, so bad. Yeah. I mean, 1834 to 2020, that's a long time of being lived in, it's
chairs up against it, people, moving stuff.
Yeah. And then there's like this modern chair rail down at the bottom. And it didn't match because Minwax doesn't match. Right. Indian red. Yeah. And burnt sienna. It just doesn't match it. So I got to do a little bit of stuff on that too. But yeah, it's been intense.
Well,
Trying to
that's that.
preserve.
Yeah, it's a very exciting project. It's always fulfilling to, I think, to be able to see something from, the beginning to the end, and to see the transformation. And you know how bad it was, even if the pictures didn't look like it was that bad.
Yeah, it was, oh my gosh, this job has been, it's incredible. And it's like a once in a lifetime thing. And it's been such an honor to preserve the work of that original craftsman.
Yes, yeah. So when you're doing that, and I don't know the process, do you just kind of build on top of what they did? Is that typically what you do?
I cleaned it to
Mhm.
the best of my ability. I was very
Yeah.
conservative with the cleaning
Yeah.
because, you gotta preserve what's there. You've got to leave it
You
there.
don't want to do something too harsh to the paint.
Right. And I kind of treated it like art conservation.
Mhm.
So I got it as clean as I gently could. And that varnish wasn't coming off for anything. I cannot, to this day, like, I don't know what the varnish is.
Yeah, because the shellac would be pretty easy.
You'd think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it was straight shellac.
Yeah.
Because no matter what I used, it wasn't budging.
Yeah.
So, and it had become gummy over time and like just collected this black dirt.
And then it was attracting all the dust and all the dirt.
Yeah, and there's this one panel in the dining room that just had these huge strips of beeswax going down it, and they blackened with time.
Yeah.
So it was me with like a pocket knife gently scraping.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Wax.
Yeah.
But then I clear coated it down, and then I came in with modern paints. We agreed, the client wanted acrylics for dry times and for cost effectiveness.
Yeah.
So I used products by Faux Effects, and actually their stain and seal line was a really good match for the original mahogany.
Is that
It's to the trade.
yeah, no, I was just thinking, like, is that like, does it look like oil paint, like those kind of tubes, or is it?
No, it's
Okay,
actually,
so then I was just trying to think if I have seen that, but
I
yeah.
can grab one if you want, but
I was just curious, like this was just a Danielle being curious.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, I'm happy to show you that, but it's in a big jar.
Okay.
And it's a very thick, gel-like consistency, and it's very highly pigmented.
Mhm.
So that was actually a really good match for the colors in the downstairs.
Yeah.
And so we had to do like a toning glaze just to make sure everything would come together and meet in the middle, because
Right.
when I had to go in and like touch up in each gap with a 5-0 brush, which is minuscule. It's the
tiny,
smallest brush I could get. So I needed that overall toning glaze just to brighten everything up and kind of harmonize things a little bit. So
Then what do you do for your top coat? Is that the toning glaze?
no, the top coat, then I would prefer to use like a UV resistant top coat that Faux Effects makes, but the client wasn't happy with the sheen.
Okay.
It was either too shiny or too dull.
Mm-hmm.
And mixing them half and half on a job that size, there's just too
goodness,
much.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you batch mix something, it's not gonna,
It's just not going to be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up using an acrylic polyurethane.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
We just actually estimated two projects that were exterior doors. One that we did probably 9 years ago, and just because of what the architect spec'd, and it's not holding up because our modern stuff doesn't hold up.
Right.
And so I recommended a high pigment solid stain, because it wasn't natural. They weren't letting the grain show through anyway. It was like a reddish color. And then I said, and then let's order some high UV protector from Europe, where they don't care about VOCs, and we won't have this problem again.
Yeah, if you can still breathe after you use it, it's probably not strong enough for exterior.
Yeah, but it's a struggle, because and then people think that it's a bad job, but it's not necessarily a bad job. It's just our products
weren't available.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
the Faux Effects has a really good UV resistant line for clear coats, but yeah, like I said, it's either like super high gloss or super dull. Yeah. and I fiddled with it a bit. And it's just, honestly, it's probably too strong for this kind of situation because it's like a marine grade.
Right. That's what this is too. Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's something that somebody's going to be in a high traffic area in a public building, heck yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like when we did a courthouse, a 1910 courthouse. I actually scored the job. Then I handed it off to a friend of mine who has who's more accustomed to working with a crew.
Right.
And I've been a crew. I was on his crew, but
Yeah.
I handed the job off to him because I don't want to fool with that. So anyway, and yeah, we totally use the big guns on those doors. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, for this, I think there's some natural light that's going to fall in there, but it's the glazes that I use they're pretty UV resistant on their own. So I figured the polyurethane would be okay.
Well, yeah. So we talked a little bit about the paint matching, but do you sometimes use like the more traditional like pigments and things depending on the project?
Yeah, on this one, actually, the paint matching was the hardest part. There's pictures on my Facebook page, and I'm still building a website, so I'm not quite set up with that yet. But there's process pictures on my Facebook page of just me and a teeny tiny paintbrush curled up on the floor with a palette and having a palette mix and just like micro adjustments.
Right.
Like a batch mix, a few colors that were kind of similar, and then just have to go through and just adjust as I go. And downstairs it went beautifully. And I did some new work downstairs as well. So I was also working alongside this artisan,
Right.
not just on top of his work.
Right.
So, and downstairs it went fine. Like I did a bunch of spalted maple.
Oh yeah.
And it looked great. And then I got upstairs where there's some original maple graining, and nothing was matching. Absolutely nothing. I tried all the faux effects products. The ochres were not right. I tried went with fine art acrylics, and the ochre wasn't right. So then I had to dig deeper into the research, and I discovered that there in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, there was a yellow ochre that was mined at that time and was heavily used.
Like specifically to that geographic region. Yeah.
Right. And I thought that must be it. Right. So the only one I could find was by Natural Pigments.
Okay.
Naturalpigments.com, and they're lovely to work with.
Right.
Let me tell you, they're absolutely lovely to work with. I will definitely go back to them. But they only make oil paints and watercolors and loose pigments.
Oh.
And everything I'm doing on this job is acrylic.
Right.
So I ended up having to order the Blue Ridge yellow ochre from California. So it was mined in Virginia, shipped to California, shipped back to Virginia for this job.
Right.
And then I ended up having to use a muller and slab
and
actually grind it into my own paint.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thankfully I have a fine art education. I know how to do that. And the people at Natural Pigments helped me with a recipe.
Right.
So yeah, I had to create my own paint for this upstairs. And then a combination of that plus the faux effects products, plus the, fine art acrylics from Golden, that combination was finally the right thing, and things started matching.
That's really, we've had struggles like that with different things on the job, but it feels so good to have like a solution and to be able to like be the person that can give you the solution. You're like the superhero that day.
I felt like one, man. Yeah. Man, because that the Blue Ridge yellow ochre is slightly orange.
Okay.
And it's translucent, where everybody else's yellow ochre is very opaque. Mm-hmm. And either like super orange or super yellow, and even combining like an Italian sienna or an Italian yellow ochre and all these things, it just wasn't
getting you the right tone. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about like the graining and marbling process, like special tools. Like I'm just really curious about the whole
when the original artisans would have done this, they would have been using a combination of, I think upstairs he actually tinted a shellac.
Okay. And
maybe added some walnut oil, possibly some beeswax, and that basically turns into this fortress of paint. So And but for me, I use like I said, faux effects products for the most part. Aqua Glaze, faux cream, which is a very slow drying. They're the clear bases, and then the tools really haven't changed that much over the last 200 years. They're pretty much the same. I've got some here with me, and we've got a pencil brush, which is like, this one's hog bristle with multiple heads, and they come in different sizes, and you can use those for the heart grain or for some marbles. I don't really use them a whole lot. I prefer to freehand all that. And we have a mottler, which is a block of hog bristle. And you can manipulate it with your fingers to create waves and different shapes. And you drag that through and create the finer grains with that. We still use rags and rollers and rockers. And this is a check roller, and it's little metal discs that have notches cut in them. Yeah. And floggers, which is like this long horsehair. I didn't grab it. It's hanging up.
That's okay.
And then our secret weapon has not changed at all. It's the same thing Thomas Kershaw would have been using, and it's a badger brush.
Okay.
It's a wooden brush with American badger hair, and you just use the tips of it, and it removes all the brush strokes and smooths everything out.
So I'm sure that's much softer, but Jonathan uses he calls it a blistering brush when he does plaster, and it's the same idea when you then you kind of just smooth it out as it's drying. And he's like that way I can do like plaster repairs, and I don't have, because we don't do it all the time, just if it's a small, if it's big, we'll call somebody else in. He's like, then mine still looks perfect because this is my secret.
It's our secret weapon. We have different sizes, and we hoard them. And they're very, very expensive brushes. This might be like this may be the most expensive brush on the market.
Oh, I'm sure.
They're over $100 a piece.
So
and then marbling, we use a lot of those same things. We don't use a mottler, but we use a quill brush, and this has a long sable point on it. And one thing that's changed a lot, that's not changed a lot, but it has changed, is back then they would have used stale beer in order to get the veining of the marbling to puddle and to move just so. And today we use stale lemon lime soda, because beer stinks.
Right.
Really, that's the big.
I would think that you'd smell like an old bar.
It does. It does. And for this job, I did play around with a sample board with beer, and I actually found the lemon lime soda is easier to manipulate. The higher sugar content makes the paint stick a lot better.
That makes sense. It would make it sticky. What was I thinking about that? And I guess you're just using it for, you like wait for it to go flat. Is that pretty much what?
Yeah, it's got to go flat.
And then you just use the liquid. Very interesting. Very interesting. So is there any? Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to ask if there was anything else that you had thought about while we were talking that you wanted to share.
Let's see. I had to get kind of in the head of the artisan that would have been doing this one particular job. I had to get in his head, like, I had to imagine him out in the front yard with his apprentices, and, one of them's grinding paint, one of them's boiling some walnut oil, one of them's, they're doing all these different jobs, one of them's grinding pigments. And then in the house, I could clearly see where different people were doing different things.
Right.
You can clearly see different hands at work.
Yeah.
So I know he had a crew working for him. I consulted with historians. I consulted with a guy who wrote a book that involved this house, a woman who wrote a book on decorative painting, and they didn't know about his process. And they couldn't tell me like what this varnish was that he was using that was so impermeable. And then there was some marbling there that I could not salvage. I couldn't salvage any of the marbling that he had done. The baseboards in the dining room were just too far gone. There was no touching it up. And the client chose to just paint it gray. But then the stairs, they were pretty badly damaged, as you can imagine. Stair kicks over close to 200 years of use. And it was abandoned for 20 years. So,
oh goodness.
Yeah. And then when I got into it, I was actually consulting with Mike McNeil at the time. It was just shortly before his passing. And we determined that it couldn't be salvaged. But we think too that the base coat on the stairs was a lime white,
Oh, yeah.
which is highly unstable.
Mhm.
And we determined that,
And
'cause
it would probably, yeah, did it start flaking off? Is that,
it was just powder
yeah, it wasn't bonding. Yeah. Yeah,
at all.
that makes sense. I mean, just from what I know about lime washes. Yeah.
Yeah, and too, when it was dry, it was obviously tinted a light gray, but then when it was wet, it got darker, which is, lime is notorious for doing that.
Yeah.
So I ended up just clear coating all of that just to lock it down, and then working on top of it. I did a completely different marble. The client chose a white marble with gray veining, and then that ended up being too strong, so we came back in and just put an Italian sienna glaze over it all and kind of browned it out a little bit. So it's just a fantasy marble. It doesn't exist in reality. But I mean, that's historically accurate,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They wouldn't have, only the finest houses would have had any examples of Italian sienna marble. So, our itinerant painter would have had to just make stuff up, which he
Right.
did.
Right.
The
Yeah.
marble he made did not exist in nature by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. But
Just knowing about how he would have gone through in his process, and like the marble that he did a lime wash, and then he came back in with this gray glaze with like these darker gray diagonal stripes, and then flung alcohol at it to make it resist.
yeah.
Kind of like this weird chain link pattern. And then he sealed it with the world's strongest shellac.
Which nobody knows what the recipe is.
Who knows? Who knows? And my client was like, we don't want to send it off to a lab. It's not worth it to us,
Yeah.
And, Mike McNeil and I determined that the only value that the marbling had was just in the fact it exists.
Right.
As a work of art, it was just way too primitive to have any actual value as artwork. So,
Right.
we decided just to honor the house with redoing a marble on the stairs, but, not necessarily reproducing his work exactly.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah, when I was preparing for this, I was looking at your Facebook page, and I showed Jonathan. I was like, Jonathan, look at the marbling on the stairs. I said, well, that's marbling. That's not marble. He's like, of course they wouldn't have used marble for the risers. Like, he was very.
yeah, you would use it for the treads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he sometimes I think he gets irritated with me because I point out obvious things to him.
Yeah. So, and as far as challenges and stuff, it's actually very challenging to downgrade your abilities into a primitive method.
Right. Yeah.
Because if I went in and did something like these pieces behind me that are more realistic, it wouldn't have looked right. It wouldn't have honored the house, and it would have made the primitive stuff that was already there look terrible.
Worse. Yeah. Yeah.
So like when I was doing the spalted maple, I was having to go back upstairs and look at the flamin' bird's eye maple that the original craftsman had done. And I was having to think, okay, well, don't go too far.
Right. Yeah. And I think as an artist, there's a tendency to do that. Like, I could do this better. I could improve on this.
Yes. And then, when I'm doing this marble on the stairs, I posted it onto a group from marbling and wood graining. And somebody's just like, oh, I'm like, well, it's supposed to be primitive,
Right. Yeah.
At 1834, this work would have been done then by some itinerant painter whose only education was through the apprentice program.
Right. Right.
It's not at all like the European school.
No.
And so it's like if I ever do anything there, I'm like, it's intentionally primitive. I don't suck, really.
Yeah.
But
I think you have to honor the house and kind of meet it where it is.
Yeah.
I think that is a challenge, because then you have to kind of hold your own self back a little bit.
Yeah, but then it's also challenging to go into a place like we did this, one of the row houses on Jones Street in Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
You go in that house, and they could have hired somebody that was brought over from one of the great houses. They could have hired their craftsman while he was here to come and do something. So there, you give it your utmost. You go as far as you can. And it was one of those slate fireplaces that had the Portoro marbleizing on it.
Yes.
And so for that, I mean, it was very finely done. And so to reproduce that, you're going to go all out.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
So you get to
but-
like use a whole range of skills.
Yeah, but for, a country house in the middle of Virginia, that would be inappropriate.
Right. Yeah, it would
So-
be. And some people might want to go that way, but yeah, I think more in line with the house. I think that approach is very appropriate.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a challenge, just to sort of dumb down your knowledge and dumb
Yeah.
down your skills to be something that would be more appropriate. And if anyone knows of someone else in the US that is doing an early American style wood graining and marbling, I would love to connect with them, because right now, as far as I can tell, I'm it.
Right.
I'm the only person.
And one thing I was thinking as we were talking, and you were talking about like the not knowing, the itinerant painters, that, not knowing their process and things, you should really start documenting your processes so that and compiling it so that people can learn.
I give my clients an entire list of a full breakdown of what I do, and I sign my work as well.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and it's a lot easier now with digital to be able to share what we know and share our knowledge. But I think that very important, and to connect with people. Have you been to any of the Preservation Trades Network events?
No, I haven't.
Okay, there's they're planning an in-person one in September, I think, in Ohio.
Okay.
And if you sign up to be a demonstrator, you get to go for free. So that's usually what I do. That's my in.
Contract, from a contractor perspective, that's the smart way to go.
Yeah.
If you're the project manager or the company, go as a visitor. But
yes,
I mean, as a contractor going to one of those events, you need to go as a vendor.
Yeah. So that's my little my idea for you. Are there any offers for our listeners? I know that you could just answer.
Well, the only offer I've got going on right now, my hometown of Noonan, Georgia, was hit really hard with an F4 tornado right through the historic district. And they're very proud of the historic district, as they should be. It wasn't hit by the Civil War. So unlike most areas in Georgia, we actually have a historic district.
Right.
Especially being as close to Atlanta as we are, that's pretty extraordinary. And so the offer that I have out there right now is for residents of the historic district in Noonan, if their house was affected by the tornado, I'm offering to come in and do the work at cost.
Okay.
Just for materials and overhead. I'm not charging for labor. And for the knowledge that I have and the type of work I do, that's going to be a huge savings for them.
Oh yeah, and it's very important, because those types of details in houses can easily get lost in an insurance claim.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And it could be too. I just want to help bring the town back up to its glory. Because it's going to be generations before the trees are back. It's going to be generations before anything looks even remotely like it did a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So we've got all these grand houses that were nearly demolished.
Yeah.
And so I know there's going to be, as a decorative painter too, I can actually faux the patina.
Right. Yeah.
So, I can go in there and I know where to hit a door with a tool to make it look, to add the right dents and dings, because I've worked in houses of that era.
Right. Yeah.
Enough. I've got 6 national buildings under my belt.
Where people hit the door, going through it, and where they.
I'm not just going to go willy-nilly with a chain like they did in the 90s. I know how to do this.
I have seen that too.
I can hit it with a chain, but it's going to be targeted.
Right.
So I mean, I'm offering to come in and just do what I do.
Yeah.
I kind of have this saying that we'll sling paint for money.
Yeah.
I'm a mercenary artist, but as far as the historic district goes, I just want to help it come back as close to where it was or better, and just do my part. And I don't have like a timeline on that, because it's going to be years before the building is done. So, I mean, but if anyone from that area is listening and you got hit by the tornado, then please let me know, and I'll just get you penciled in. And when the contractors leave, I can come in.
Very good. Thank you very much. So how can our listeners contact you?
I am on Etsy, Instagram, and Facebook as Aubern Mason Artist. And my name is spelled kind of funny. It's Aubern, Mason, artist. And I hopefully have a website up within the next month.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I've been in the process of updating ours for a long time, and I understand how that goes. It's a process, and it's when I don't have time, it's, that's something that doesn't get to the top of the list.
Yeah, and since I took time off to have kids, like everything I knew about web design is obsolete now.
Yeah.
So I'm starting over from scratch.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm glad that we got to connect.
I'm thrilled. This was really exciting. I'm just tickled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.